The waters that changed the world. A story of the Diluvium. The world before the flood, a planet in decline. Long before the sky darkened and the waters swallowed the earth, the world was a canvas of divine beauty. The morning sun spilled golden light across endless fields. The air was sweet with the fragrance of blossoming trees, and the gentle murmur of rivers whispered secrets to the wind. Mountains stood firm and majestic, their snowy crowns catching the light like celestial crowns, while the oceans stretched wide, deep and mysterious, holding secrets in their waves. The Creator had formed this world with loving hands, crafting a delicate balance between the elements, where every creature, from the smallest insect to the mightiest beast, held a purpose. The earth was alive with color, sound, and movement, a living tapestry reflecting the glory of its maker. And at the center of this creation stood mankind, fashioned from dust yet breathed into life with the breath of God Himself. Man and woman were created to steward this paradise, to nurture and care for the earth and all living things. In those early days, humanity walked with the divine in close fellowship, their hearts open and their lives full of gratitude. But as the generations passed, a shadow began to creep across the land. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. The hearts of men grew restless, their desires turning toward things that stirred darkness within them. Greed, pride, envy, and violence. The first murmurs of discontent grew into a thunderous roar. Brothers turned against brothers. Neighbors became enemies. The bonds that held communities together frayed and broke. Cities rose like towering monuments to human ambition, but instead of honoring the Creator, they became dens of corruption and cruelty. Markets buzzed with the exchange of goods, but also with lies and deceit. Temples once sacred were defiled by selfish worship and idolatry. The arts and sciences flourished, but often to serve vanity and lust for power rather than wisdom and compassion. The earth itself seemed to respond. Where rivers once ran clear, they now flowed thick with mud and blood. The skies, once clear and bright, were often clouded by storms and smoke. Animals fled from the noise and violence, and even the forests seemed to grow silent, as if mourning the loss of innocence. Noah walked through this broken world with a heavy heart. He saw the cruelty, how the strong trampled the weak, how lies were prized over truth, how the sacred was mocked and forgotten. Yet, unlike many, Noah's spirit remained steadfast. He clung to the ancient truths passed down from the days of creation. He taught his sons to honor God, to live with kindness, justice, and humility. In the marketplace, where men bartered and fought, Noah's voice was a quiet but unwavering call to repentance. "Turn from your wicked ways," he warned. "The Lord is just and His patience will not endure forever." His neighbors laughed and sneered. "Noah, you build a ship on dry land? What foolishness is this? The earth will never drown. Put down your hammer and live among us as we do." But Noah would not be swayed. At night, he knelt beneath the stars and prayed. The vast expanse above, sparkling with countless lights, reminded him of God's promise and presence. Yet he felt the weight of coming judgment, a sorrow too deep for words. "Father, show mercy," he whispered. "Spare us if you will, but I will obey your will, whatever it may be." Time moved slowly, marked by the steady progress of the ark rising on the dry earth. Day by day, Noah's hands shaped the timber, and his family worked alongside him. They spoke little of the mockery outside, but held fast to the hope within. And then the message came, the voice of God calling from the heavens, a voice that echoed through the mountains and valleys, clear and commanding. "Noah," it said, "the end has come for this generation. The earth is corrupt before me and filled with violence. I will bring a flood upon the earth to destroy all flesh. But you shall build an ark, a sanctuary of life amidst destruction. You and your family shall be saved." The task was daunting. The ark was to be unlike any vessel before, vast and strong, able to withstand the fury of the flood. Its dimensions were immense, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, an enormous floating refuge. Noah's heart swelled with both fear and resolve. "Father," his wife said softly, "do you truly believe this will happen? The people will laugh, and the work will be endless." Noah placed his hands on her shoulders. "I must trust." The voice was the voice of God. "We will obey." And so the great work began, a symbol of faith in a world that had lost its way. The ark and the obedient servant, faith amidst the mockers. The morning sun broke slowly over the horizon, its golden light brushing the hills in silence. It was a dawn like any other, but Noah stood still in the field behind his dwelling, staring at the marked ground where the foundation of the ark would be laid. Around him, the world carried on as if nothing had changed. Children played, merchants prepared their carts, livestock stirred. But for Noah, the world had shifted forever. He could still hear the voice of the Lord echoing through every chamber of his soul. It hadn't been a dream, nor a vision conjured by his own fears. It had been clear, commanding, and real. There would be a flood. All flesh would perish. The corruption of mankind had reached its end. "Noah," the Lord had said, "make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it." God had not left him alone to guess or wonder. The measurements had been given in exact detail. 300 cubits in length, nearly 500 feet, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits tall. The ark would have 3 decks, each one meticulously planned. A single door, a window near the roofline. The vessel was not made for speed or navigation. It was made for survival. A box of life sealed against judgment. And so, with trembling hands and an unshakable heart, Noah had obeyed. He began to gather the gopher wood, dense, resinous, strong. Its scent filled the air as he and his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth cut, hauled, and trimmed the timbers. His wife and daughters-in-law brought water and prepared meals, their faces quiet and contemplative, their minds filled with unspoken worries. Every cut of the saw, every driven peg, was an act of faith. Days turned to weeks and weeks into months. The ark began to rise from the earth, a monstrous thing unlike anything the people had ever seen. They came by the dozens, then by the hundreds, just to stare. First, it was curiosity. "Noah, what is this?" they would ask. "It is a vessel," he answered plainly, "to carry us through the waters of judgment." Some blinked at him, others laughed. "Judgment? You speak of myths, old man. The gods bless us with abundance. You insult them with your prophecies of doom." But Noah would not argue. He did not raise his voice in anger or shout into the crowd. He spoke softly and went back to work. As the years passed, the mockery grew sharper. "Noah builds a ship with no river. Shall we bring him paddles for the dirt?" Perhaps the sky told him it would rain fish and birds. "Go ahead and build your floating box, Noah. We will build towers to the sky and survive your imaginary flood." Sometimes the mockers threw stones, not with intent to harm, but to mock. Children learned from their fathers to jeer when they passed. At market, Noah's name was mentioned with smirks. And still Noah built. He built when he was tired. He built when his hands bled. He built through blistering summers and bitter winters. His beard grew white, and his sons became men. Yet the rhythm of hammers and saws never stopped. At night, by firelight, Noah would kneel outside the half-built ark and pray, "Lord, I do not see the rain. I do not hear the thunder. But I believe you. Give me strength to finish." Inside their home, his wife would sit with the other women, sewing garments or preparing food, whispering among themselves. "Do you think it will happen?" one daughter-in-law asked. "All of it? A flood so great it will cover the earth." Noah's wife paused, her hands working slowly over the cloth. "I have seen my husband's eyes when he speaks of the Lord," she said, "and I remember the stories of Eden, the world before sin. If God made all this, he can undo it too." They sat in silence, hearts heavy with the knowledge that the old world would not last. And outside, the ark continued to rise. The inner rooms were shaped like honeycombs of order and purpose. There were pens for the animals, large stalls for beasts of burden, smaller cages for birds, nesting areas, feeding troughs, chutes for waste. Noah and his sons planned it all with foresight guided by faith. Each part was measured twice, tested, and made sturdy. Pitch was boiled and poured between the planks, sealing the seams. The scent of tar filled the air, mixing with sawdust and sweat. Soon, the structure would be sealed, watertight, ready. Every evening, Noah returned to the plans the Lord had given him. Not a single instruction was altered. Then came the next command. "Bring into the ark 2 of every sort of living thing, male and female, to keep them alive with you." First, Noah could not imagine it. How could such a thing be done? Would he scour the lands? Climb mountains? Search forests? But then the miracle began. It began on a quiet morning. The ark stood nearly finished, its hull dark with pitch, its towering frame casting long shadows across the earth. A breeze moved across the field like a breath from the heavens. Noah had just emerged from the ark's lower deck where he'd been reinforcing a feed room when he paused at the sound of rustling grass beyond the horizon. A tremble moved beneath the soles of his feet. It wasn't thunder, It was rhythm, footsteps, but not human. He turned. Over the rise came a pair of lions, golden and silent. They walked side by side, muscles rolling beneath their fur, eyes forward, regal and calm. There was no roar, no menace in them, only purpose. Noah froze. His heart pounded. Behind them, emerging from the trees, came a pair of wolves, gray and lean. Then elephants, their massive feet thudding against the ground in solemn cadence. Birds overhead spiraled down in flocks. Herons, sparrows, hawks. From the underbrush crawled reptiles, great and small. Snakes, lizards, turtles. Insects buzzed past in thick clouds but hovered without chaos. From every direction they came in pairs, male and female. His sons ran toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. "Father, do you see?" Ham gasped. "I see," Noah whispered. They stood together in reverent silence, watching the miracle unfold. The creatures walked not in panic or confusion, but as if guided by an unseen hand. The air seemed to shimmer with divine order. The very soil did not resist them, and no beast harmed another. Predator and prey, side by side, moving in peace. People from the nearby city came rushing in droves. They stopped at the edge of the field, gawking and murmuring. "What is this?" some cried. "How can it be? Are those not jungle beasts? How could they travel so far? Who commands such creatures?" Noah heard their questions, but he did not answer. He had no words for what he beheld, only awe. The animals gathered at the foot of the ark's ramp, waiting. Not a single one tried to flee or fight. Noah stepped forward slowly, raising his hand in welcome. Then, as if on cue, the procession began. The great cats, tigers, leopards, panthers, walked gracefully into the lower levels. Camels followed, then antelope. Birds fluttered up to perches he'd prepared. Cattle lumbered into their stalls. Rodents scurried into their compartments, obedient and sure. His daughters-in-law guided smaller animals. Shem directed beasts into their assigned places. Japheth hauled feed sacks and straw into the holding pens. Ham poured water into troughs. For 7 days this continued. More animals arrived, pairs of every kind, according to their kind, clean and unclean, insects and mammals, birds and reptiles. 7 pairs of the clean beasts entered, in keeping with the Lord's earlier instruction. The symmetry was divine, the balance beyond understanding. On the 5th day, as Noah walked through the ark, checking compartments, he passed a doe resting beside a lioness. Both lifted their heads at his approach, unafraid. He knelt. "The Lord has quieted your hearts," he murmured. "You know more of his presence than many of my own people." Outside, the crowds grew restless. Some began to argue. If these things obey the man, then surely this is not the work of Noah, but of a power we do not know. Others scoffed. Animals are strange and wild. Proves nothing. There is no flood. Look, the sky is clear, but the air had changed. The sun, though still warm, carried attention. Clouds began to gather, not dark yet, but layered. The birds sang less frequently. The insects buzzed lower to the ground. Dogs barked in distant towns for no clear reason. By the seventh day, every pair had arrived. The ark was full. From the rooftop, Noah watched the last crimson sun set over a world on the edge of judgment. His heart was heavy with grief, not because he feared the flood. His faith in God's promise was immovable, but because he knew that when the rains came, the cries of the people would be cries of regret. He had pleaded with them. For decades, he'd warned them. The ark itself was a sermon in wood and tar, yet their hearts had remained like stone. Now the door stood open, the one door wide enough for anyone who wished to enter. No one did. The final day, when the door was shut, the seventh day began in eerie stillness. The early light barely crept through the heavy mist that clung to the ground like a funeral shroud. The air was dense and thick, as though the very breath of the world was holding itself in. Not a single bird sang. Not a single breeze stirred the tall grass. Noah stood atop the ark, his weathered hands resting on the rail. He looked to the east where the sun, once rising strong and golden, now bled weak through gray cloud. Below him, the earth still seemed unchanged. No waves, no rain, no sound but the distant bleating of sheep or the low grumble of cattle within the ark. His eyes scanned the fields. The people had stopped laughing. The crowds were smaller now. Some came at dawn and lingered on the hills in silence, watching the wooden giant resting on dry land. Even the mockers had fallen quiet. No more stones, no more jests, only whispers. Shem joined his father, eyes red from sleeplessness. "Still no one comes," he said quietly. "They've seen the animals. They've heard the warnings, but they will not come. They cannot," Noah said. His voice cracked not from age, but sorrow. "Their hearts are locked like iron. The door stands open, but they will not see it." Noah's wife gathered the last of the provisions, stacking clay jars of oil and dried figs alongside woven sacks of barley. Ham and Japheth walked the corridors, tightening ropes, adjusting feed chutes, checking on the animals who now moved nervously in their pens. Even they could sense what was coming. Noah climbed down slowly. His knees ached. Every step carried weight, not from the years of labor, but from the gravity of this final morning. He entered the ark and stood by the massive door, tall as a tree and thick as a stone wall. It had taken months to shape, to fit perfectly into its frame. The world still had this last moment, but no one came. No man, no woman, no child. The Creator had said it would be 7 days. 7 days to gather. 7 days of mercy. 7 days of waiting. But that time had ended. And so, the voice came again. Not like a thunderclap, not like a storm. It was still and strong, resounding not through the air, but through Noah's soul. "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." Noah called out to his family, "Come, it is time." The sons gathered. The wives followed, tears welling in their eyes. Each step they took into the ark was a step away from the world they had known. The smell of soil, the faces of friends, the warmth of open sky. Noah was last. He turned at the foot of the ramp, eyes scanning the fields one last time. His vision blurred with tears. People stood on the ridges, still watching. Some with arms crossed, some clinging to children, some biting their lips, unsure. He lifted his voice, one final cry, his throat raw. "This is your last hour. Come, there is still room." But no one moved. A pause, then silence. And then, without a human hand, the great door moved. A groaning, ancient sound like mountains shifting. The door swung inward. The sunlight dimmed. Noah stepped back, and the door closed, not by rope, not by winch, not by strength of men, but by God. A resounding final thud echoed through the ark as the heavy seal fell into place, locking the world out and the chosen in. Inside, total silence. No one spoke. Then a sound, soft at first, barely a whisper, pattering like dry seed tossed on a roof, like the footfall of a sparrow. Raindrops. Japheth turned toward the ceiling beams. "It's begun," he whispered. More drops, steady now, tapping like fingers on wood. Outside, clouds thickened, boiling in slow spirals of gray and black. Thunder rolled in the distance, not yet fierce, but approaching. Lightning flickered low behind the horizon like candlelight beneath a doorway. And then it came, sudden, strong, a roar from the skies. Rain, a downpour that struck the earth like hammers. The ark trembled slightly with the force of it. The sound filled the chamber like a river falling from heaven. The animals stirred, hooves shuffled, feathers flapped. A horse neighed. A lioness growled low in her throat. Inside, Noah knelt. "Lord, your will be done." Outside, the people ran for shelter, shouting, slipping, calling to one another. But the door was closed. The rising of the waters, the unmaking of the world. The rain did not stop. It fell like judgment, like grief, like the very tears of the heavens. By the second hour, the world had already begun to change. Streams burst their banks. Paths became rivers. The roads Noah had walked for decades disappeared beneath rushing water. But it wasn't only rain from above. No, the fountains of the deep, those ancient reservoirs hidden in the bowels of the earth, split open with a groaning that shook the mountains. Beneath their feet, the land itself trembled. Within the ark, the wooden beams creaked and groaned, the pitch-black hull flexing with the violence of a world unraveling. The animals stirred nervously. The lions growled in their sleep. Cattle bellowed. The birds beat against their cages. The air inside the ark grew heavy, as if holding its breath. Ham stood near a window slit at the top deck. "Father," he shouted, voice strained. "The ground is gone. The water, it's climbing the hills." Noah joined him. He could not see clearly through the slanted rain, but he could make out the outlines of the world he had known, disappearing. The fields where he had planted barley. The distant tree where he had first proposed to his wife. The footpath to the nearby town, all vanishing beneath a relentless, rising tide. A shriek echoed from outside. Faint, then closer, then many, cries, human cries. Noah closed his eyes. His heart sank like a stone. They had come too late. From the third deck, Japheth called out, "They're trying to climb the ark, Father." Noah hurried down the stairs, followed by his wife. At the lower end, where the sealed door stood like the mouth of a tomb, the noise from outside throbbed like a second heartbeat. Thudding fists, fingernails scraping against wood, pleading voices. "Noah, please, please open. We were wrong. You were right. Let us in." Children screamed. A man's voice broke with weeping. "Just the baby. At least save my child." The family huddled inside. Shem wept into his hands. His wife clung to him, sobbing. But the door would not open, because Noah did not close it. God had. Outside, the rain intensified. Thunder shattered the sky, rolling like drums of war. The wind howled. The ark rocked slightly as torrents slammed its sides. And then silence. Not inside, where breathing and sobbing still filled the space, but from outside the door. The banging stopped. The screaming ceased. Noah knew why. The water had reached their mouths, and then their lungs. The only sound now was rain and wind, and the roaring of waters as they carved new paths across the face of the earth, tearing trees from roots, smashing stones, lifting houses like feathers and dashing them into splinters. Cities fell. Stone walls crumbled as if made of ash. Temples once towering were ground down like sand under a tidal wave. Palaces of kings vanished into the deep. The world was being undone, and inside the ark, life floated above the chaos. Noah remained kneeling for hours, his head bowed. He prayed not for deliverance, for they had already been delivered, but for peace, for rest, for the unbearable ache in his chest to subside. He prayed for the souls outside, for the children, for the friends he had once laughed with, for the fields he had tended, for the world, once full of promise, now silent. His wife placed a hand on his shoulder. "I can't bear the sound," she whispered. Noah looked up at her, his eyes sunken but clear. "Neither can I, but we must." They stayed like that all night, listening to the storm of heaven and the mourning of earth. Days adrift, when the heavens held their breath. After the fury came the quiet. The skies, once boiling with thunder and fire, fell still. The rain, relentless and pounding, tapered to a drizzle, and then stopped. The last drop slid from the edge of the ark's roof and fell into a world that no longer existed. There was no cheering inside the ark, no applause, no celebration, only silence, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest like a stone, a silence that spoke of absence, that made the creaking of wood and the breathing of animals sound like thunder. The ark floated gently now, no longer tossed by waves, but adrift upon an endless ocean. No land in sight, no mountains, no trees, no sky that gave answers, just water, gray, featureless, unbroken water. It had covered even the highest peaks. Inside the ark, time slowed to a crawl. There was no sunrise to mark the beginning of the day, nor sunset to close it. The heavy clouds persisted for weeks, casting everything in a dull silver glow. Meals became routine, and voices rarely rose above a murmur. Shem kept a record in a charcoal log. Day 21, he wrote. The doves cooed again. The tigers have settled. Father still prays each morning and night without fail. The animals too had changed. In the first days, they had been restless, nervous from the storm, uneasy in their confinement. But something unseen had quieted them. They fed when fed. They lay down when the light dimmed. No predator turned on another. The ark became a sanctuary not only from water, but from nature's wilder urges. Japheth was the strongest. He hauled feed barrels, lifted sacks, scrubbed troughs. He said little, but his movements were purposeful. When one of the cows delivered a calf on day 34, he was the first to hold it steady on its trembling legs. Ham was different. He paced often, peered through the small window slits with a clenched jaw. At night, he lay awake, muttering into his blanket. "We're forgotten," he said once bitterly. "The rain has stopped, but there's no land, no wind, no sign." He shut the door, but did he also walk away? Noah heard him, but he said nothing at first. He waited, and on the morning of day 40, after prayers and feeding rounds, he sat beside his middle son in the shadow of a stack of hay. "Noah," Ham said before his father could speak, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't doubt, but I cannot feel him." Noah put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You feel the silence," he said. "So do I." Ham looked down. "I don't understand it." He showed his power in the flood. "Why not speak now when it matters more?" Noah nodded. "Because sometimes the silence is part of the lesson. And sometimes faith means rowing through a sea of silence until we see the first mountain again." Ham stared at him, unsure. "Son," Noah said gently, "he shut the door to protect us, and he will open it when the time comes." The days turned to weeks. They tended the animals. They collected waste and tossed it through upper hatches. They rationed feed carefully. They lit oil lamps when the clouds made it too dark to see. They learned to listen to the sounds of the ark, the wooden groans, the soft breathing of sleeping beasts, the flapping of wings. And each night they sat as a family. Noah read from the words of the old traditions, the stories of creation passed down from Adam's line, of Eden, of the tree, of the promise. They spoke of justice and mercy, of sin and redemption. The children listened. Even the animals seemed still when Noah spoke. "God is not absent," he would say. "He is watching the water with us. He is not bound by time." Still, doubt crept in on the longest nights. One evening, a storm passed. Nothing like the flood, just wind and rain. And the ark tilted so hard a jar of oil shattered on the middle deck. Noah rushed to secure the ramp. The lions roared in fear. A goat fell and broke its leg. Japheth ran to hold the creature, wrapping it gently in linen. That night they barely slept. Shem's wife wept silently in her bedroll. "Will we die in this wooden tomb?" she whispered. "Will we ever see sunlight again?" Even Noah struggled to answer. The silence from the heavens was not punishment. It was something harder to bear, a test of endurance. Faith in the storm was one thing. Faith in stillness, that was something else entirely. On the 150th day, something shifted. Japheth, climbing to the uppermost hatch, paused. He sniffed the air. "Wind," he said aloud. "Fresh, dry wind." He shouted for the others. Noah came quickly, climbing the ladder with aching joints. They stood at the hatch and felt it. A breeze, cool and crisp, not the choking moisture of endless floodwaters, but the scent of land. Something had changed. The waters were beginning to recede. The return of the earth, hope on dry ground. The wind continued for days. It curled through the ark's beams, stirring dust and rustling hay. It slipped through the slits near the roof, whispering against the wooden walls like a promise long awaited. And slowly the waters responded. Noah marked the days. 150 since the fountains of the deep were broken. 150 since the sky first tore open and the cries of mankind echoed against the hull of the ark. Now, for the first time, the waves no longer rolled endlessly beneath them. One morning, as the sky brightened into soft pink and violet, the ark gave a sudden, gentle shudder. It stopped moving, a jolt subtle but final. The wood groaned. The water no longer bore it. The hull had come to rest on something solid. Japheth was the first to speak. "Is it over?" Noah didn't answer. He moved slowly through the decks, listening to the silence. Outside, the wind still blew, but it was no longer fierce. It sounded like breath, divine, steady, cleansing. He climbed to the highest window, lifted the shutter, and saw mountains. Not all of them. Their jagged peaks broke through a sea of mist. But they were there. Ancient stone fingers reaching through the fog like the bones of the earth awakening. Mountains. The ark had come to rest in the highlands of Ararat. His knees gave way beneath him. He knelt, pressed his forehead to the wooden floor, and whispered, "Thank you." For 5 more months they remained. Though the ark had landed, the land was not yet ready. Through narrow windows, they watched the waters pull back. Each day a slow revealing of buried valleys, forests stripped bare, jagged canyons carved by wrath. Trees stood broken like blackened bones. Carcasses floated on the retreating tides. The once lush earth now looked like the battlefield of a war too old to name. But green returned, first in patches, then sprigs of vine, then buds. One morning, Noah stood holding a raven. He looked it in the eye, and the bird blinked, alert, restless. He opened the shutter. "Go," he whispered. The raven took flight, cutting into the morning air, circling once, then vanishing into the clouds. It didn't return. Noah waited another week. This time he called for a dove. Soft and gray, it cooed quietly as he cupped it in his hands. He released it and watched as it soared away, a flash of pale wings over the silver waters. Evening came. Noah waited at the window, eyes straining into the dusk. And then a flutter of wings. The dove returned. In its beak, a single olive leaf. Shem cried out with joy. The women wept. Noah held the leaf between his fingers as if it were gold. Life, earth not drowned but reborn. Another week passed. Then Noah released the dove again. This time it did not return. Noah did not call it back. He looked around at his family. It's time. They gathered their few things, robes, tools, food stores. They unlatched pens, opened cages, unbarred the great door. It had been a year since it had last opened. Now the seal cracked, wood groaned, light poured in, real light, unfiltered, warm. Noah stepped out first. He blinked at the brightness, then gasped softly. The air smelled clean. Not like the sea, not like decay, but like morning dew, like pine, like fresh-turned soil. The land before him was silent, but not dead. It hummed with waiting. Behind him, the animals began to emerge. Pairs of them just as they had come. Cattle and deer, lions and sparrows, goats and foxes, creeping things and flying things. They did not run wild. They moved slowly, sniffing the earth, tasting the grass. It was as though the whole of creation was holding its breath. Noah gathered his family. They stood together on the fresh earth, surrounded by silence. Then Noah fell to his knees. He gathered stones from the ground, uncut, unshaped. One by one, he laid them into a circle, place of sacrifice, not of death, but of thanksgiving. He built the first altar the new world would ever see. He took of every clean animal and clean bird and offered it to the Lord, as he had commanded. Smoke rose into the air, curling upward, a visible prayer. The Lord smelled the offering, and he spoke, not in thunder or flame, but in covenant. I will never again curse the ground because of man. Never again will I destroy all living creatures. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. And to Noah directly he said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Noah bowed his head. His heart swelled with awe and trembling. The Lord had not just saved them. He had begun again. And then the sky changed. The clouds pulled back. The rain was gone. And in its place, across the whole dome of the heavens, a bow of light, a rainbow, not just color, but promise. Red like the blood of sacrifice, blue like the sky reborn, green like the earth that had survived. The first covenant, promise to the world. Noah watched it, tears falling down his face. Not for the judgment, not for the sorrow, but for the mercy.